Prime Minister Tony Abbott, who was in Papua New Guinea just a week or so ago, talked about Australia and PNG being like family.
Yeah.
And in many ways, our family bonds were forged during the fighting that took place in World War II, where we did work and fight alongside each other. That was very significant in terms of the subsequent growth of the idea of PNG as a nation, but very much this sense that we are brothers and sisters. This is a project that we've been invited to. We're invited to join. When I say we, that's Deakin University. I put the proposal in earlier this year for us to conduct oral history interviews with Papua New Guineans living in villages along the Kokoda track about their recollections and experiences during the war.
Yep.
And it's also because we're quite conscious that there won't be many people left alive who had direct experiences during the war. We're also able to talk to their children and their descendants and why their memories and the stories that have come down to them about what happened when the Japanese invaded the northern coast of Papua in 1942, and they fought Australian forces to within sight of Port Moresby across what's now known as the Kokoda Track, and then Australian forces, Australian troops, both militia and AIF forces, were able to fight the Japanese back and eventually onto the coast at Buna and Gona and Sanananda, and then further up the coast. So it was an amazing story in both Australian and Papua New Guinean history. So much has been written from the Australian perspective. Very little has been recorded about Papua New Guinea. One of the people who has written about this is I'm joined with by Professor John Waiko, who is Papua New Guinea's preeminent historian.
So it's a very, very exciting project for the people. We are basically the facilitators and let the people tell their stories. We will record and make sure that the stories will be told and retold and shared by the people themselves, particularly on either side of the Kokoda to Sogeri track. And it is very, very important that we must actually capture the moments of the World War II, particularly from July 1942 to the end of the war in 1945, and of course before the Hiroshima bomb actually was over. But that bomb, apparently, plane actually landed in Papua New Guinea before it flew to drop the bomb in Hiroshima. So this is the story that we're going to make sure that it's been told and retold and kept for the future generations of our both countries and the world. I interviewed Mr. Ohembari in the film Angels of War. I don't know whether you have seen that, but that's a film shot in 1982 by and I interviewed him on camera, and it's a great story and a warrior who spoke in his experience of particularly helping that American soldier, Mr. Whittington, George Whittington, who was shot, and he was sharing with me how he captured that soldier and actually shared the hard biscuits between the two as they were walking the wounded soldier to the clinic, and of course subsequently he cried when the gentleman soldier died.
So there's a lot told waiting for us out there. But I should say, John, has written a number of accounts going back into his time as one of the first students at the University of Papua New Guinea in the 1960s, when students history students at that stage were encouraged to go out and record stories of women who were at that stage it was only 20 years or so after the war. There's a lot was still fresh. Just as a part of this project, Sandra, I and my colleague Murray Noonan at ADRI have been going through, undertaking a desktop survey of all the literature that includes some of John's writing that records a lot of these stories, typically record what people felt on their first sight, let's say, of Japanese ships or Japanese boats that arrived from the sea. The first time that bombs were dropped or guns were fired. The experiences of the breakdown of the previous colonial administration and the departure of Australians.
Then, John, may I interrupt? It's a question of loyalty.
Yes.
Whether the loyalty of the people of the Northern Province would be loyal to the Australians, or whether they would withdraw their loyalty and take side with the Japanese. And the question of the difficulty that the people had. And by the way, Sandra, when I recorded the oral traditions, the oral history, there was a vivid memory of the deaths. There was a vivid memory of the mourning, the cry, particularly when the mothers were affected when the young men were recruited, able-bodied men recruited to take part for the carriers. And I published of these. I recorded them in the mother tongues, and then I translated them in English and published them. And it's a very, very what's the word? Very, very touching, very, very emotional, very, very sad. And some of the collections are still alive, and this is where Jonathan and I are actually trying to inspire and encourage for the living history to be retold and resung and shared. They do among themselves in the villages and in the forest and in the mountains.